My mom canceled my graduation party because my brother wasn't getting enough attention. She said I needed to be more understanding and let him have the spotlight for once. So I packed my bags and left that same night with nothing but my diploma and a dream. 3 years later, I'd built a life they never thought I could. And when my brother found out how successful I'd become, his jealous breakdown exposed every lie my mom ever had. I, 22M, stood in the backyard staring at the deflated balloons I'd spent the previous evening blowing up myself, watching them sag against the fence like broken promises. The folding table sat empty. The graduation banner I'd printed at the library hung crooked between two posts. Mom had called everyone that morning and canceled. All of it. Gone. She found me there around noon, her expression already defensive before she even opened her mouth. She told me my brother was having a hard time with his semester grades, and seeing me celebrate would make him feel worse about himself. She said I needed to understand that not everything could be about me, that I was older and should know better than to flaunt my achievements when he was struggling. The party could happen another time, she said. Maybe next month. Maybe later. I asked her when exactly my accomplishments had ever been about me. She didn't answer, just walked back inside. My brother was 20 and finishing his sophomore year at community college with a 1.8 GPA he'd earned by skipping classes and spending his nights gaming. I'd graduated top of my class from State University on a full academic scholarship I'd fought for because we couldn't afford tuition. I'd worked 2 jobs throughout college. I'd written my thesis on 3 hours of sleep most nights. I'd done everything right. And here I was, staring at decorations for a party that would never happen because my success made someone else uncomfortable. I walked inside and found my brother sprawled on the couch watching videos on his phone. He glanced up when I entered, then quickly looked away. He knew. Of course he knew. I asked him if he'd asked Mom to cancel the party. He mumbled something about how he hadn't asked for anything, that Mom just understood what he needed. That maybe I should try being less selfish for once. Something crystallized in that moment, cold and sharp and final. I went upstairs and started packing. I didn't have much. 4 years of college had taught me to live light. Clothes, laptop, documents, the few books I couldn't bear to leave behind. My diploma sat on my desk in its cheap frame. I took it out, left the frame, and slid the paper into a folder. Mom found me as I was loading the last bag into my beat-up Honda. She asked what I thought I was doing. I told her exactly what it looked like. She said I was being dramatic, that I was throwing a tantrum over nothing. I asked her to name one time in the past 5 years she'd chosen me over my brother. One time she'd told him no to tell me yes. One time my needs had mattered more than his feelings. She couldn't. She just stood there, and I saw it in her face. The moment she realized I was serious. She started backpedaling, saying we could talk about this, that I was misunderstanding everything, that she loved us both equally. I told her love without respect was just empty words. Then I got in my car and drove away. I had $800 in my bank account, a job offer in another city that started in 2 weeks, and absolutely nothing to lose. Update 1. The first year was brutal in ways I hadn't anticipated. The job was entry-level data analysis at a mid-sized tech firm, barely enough to cover rent in a studio apartment that smelled like old carpet and someone else's cooking. I ate ramen and rice in combinations I never want to experience again. I bought my clothes from thrift stores and walked 40 minutes to work to save on gas. But I was free. Nobody told me my achievements were too loud. Nobody needed me to dim myself so someone else could feel adequate. For the first time in my life, I could be as successful as I was capable of being. Mom called twice in those first 6 months, both times to tell me my brother was having a hard time and needed encouragement, that maybe I could send some money to help him out. Not once did she ask how I was doing. I stopped answering after that. I worked like a man possessed. I took every extra project, learned every new software, volunteered for the assignments nobody else wanted. My manager noticed. 6 months in, I got promoted to a junior analyst role with a 20% raise. I moved to a better apartment, started eating actual vegetables. By the end of year 1, I'd saved enough to enroll in an online master's program. Data science, specializing in machine learning. I did coursework at night after 10-hour days at the office. Weekends disappeared into programming tutorials and statistical models. I didn't have friends, didn't have time for dating. I had a singular focus: build something they said I couldn't. Year 2, I got headhunted by a larger firm. Senior analyst position. Real salary. Benefits, stock options. I negotiated hard and got everything I asked for. Moved into a one-bedroom with actual sunlight and space for a desk that wasn't my kitchen table. I finished my master's degree that year with a 4.0 GPA. Defended my thesis on predictive modeling via Zoom at 11 p.m. on a Thursday. No ceremony, no celebration. Just me and my diploma and the quiet satisfaction of knowing I'd done it alone. Social media stayed deleted. I'd nuked everything the week I left home. No Facebook, no Instagram, nothing. If mom or my brother wanted to find me, they'd have to actually care enough to try. They didn't. Year 3 changed everything. A former colleague reached out with a proposition. He'd left the corporate world to start a consulting firm specializing in data infrastructure for mid-market companies. He needed someone technical who could talk to clients. He'd thought of me immediately. Partnership track. Equity stake. The risk was real, but so was the potential. I took the leap. Within 6 months, we'd landed 3 major contracts. Within a year, we had 12 employees and a client roster that made my old corporate salary look quaint. I bought a condo, not rented, bought. Started investing, started building actual wealth. I'd made it, not just survived, but genuinely made it. That's when my brother found me. Update 2. I was in a coffee shop near my office on a Saturday morning, reviewing contracts on my laptop, when someone sat down across from me uninvited. I looked up, annoyed, ready to tell whoever it was that the seat was taken. My brother stared back at me, older, heavier, with the particular kind of tired that comes from years of going nowhere. He'd found me somehow. Later I'd learned he'd hired someone to track me down through professional networks and business registrations. He'd spent actual money to find me. He started talking immediately, words tumbling out like he'd rehearsed them. How he'd heard through someone who knew someone that I was doing well. How he'd seen my company's website and couldn't believe it was really me. How proud he was. How much he'd missed me. I let him talk, watched his performance, waited for the real reason. It came eventually. It always does. He was in debt. Serious debt. He'd dropped out of college after another failed semester and bounced between jobs for 2 years before landing something stable in retail management. But he'd made mistakes. Credit cards, a car loan he couldn't afford, some investment scheme that went south. He was drowning, and mom couldn't help because she was barely keeping her own head above water after dad passed away the year before. I hadn't known dad died. Nobody told me. My brother noticed my expression shift and quickly added that they'd tried to reach me but couldn't find me. That mom had been devastated. I wasn't at the funeral. That she'd cried for weeks. I asked him how hard they'd really tried. My email hadn't changed. My phone number was the same. Hell, I'd filed business registration documents with my name on them in public records. If they'd wanted to find me, they could have. He got defensive. Said I'd cut them off. That I'd made it impossible. That I was the one who left. I reminded him why I left. He had the decency to look uncomfortable. Then he told me what he really wanted. $50,000. To clear his debts and start fresh. He promised he'd pay me back, that this was just a temporary situation, that he'd learned his lesson. I asked him what lesson exactly he'd learned. He fumbled through some vague statements about responsibility and making better choices. Nothing concrete. Nothing real. I told him no. His face transformed. The pleading expression vanished, replaced by something uglier. He said I owed the family. That they'd supported me growing up, put a roof over my head, fed me. That mom had sacrificed everything for us and I'd abandoned her when she needed me most. That dad died thinking I hated him. I told him support wasn't something you held over someone's head later as leverage. That parents were supposed to support their children. That was the basic requirement of having kids. And that I'd offered mom plenty of chances to have a relationship with me, but she only called when she needed something. He called me selfish. Said I'd always thought I was better than everyone else. That my success had made me arrogant and cold. I stood up, closed my laptop and looked at him directly. I told him I'd spent 22 years making myself smaller so he could feel adequate. I dimmed every light, downplayed every achievement, swallowed every disappointment, and it was never enough. He'd still needed more. Mom had still chosen his comfort over my dignity. I told him I didn't owe him a damn thing. Then I left. He didn't follow. Update 3. 2 weeks later, Mom called from a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. She was crying. Actual, genuine tears. She told me my brother had a breakdown after our meeting, that he'd apparently been holding everything together by telling himself I hadn't really succeeded, that the rumors were exaggerated. Seeing me, seeing the proof, had broken something in him. In his breakdown, he'd confessed everything to her. All of it. How he'd asked her to cancel my graduation party because he couldn't stand seeing me celebrated. How it wasn't about his grades at all. He just hated that I was succeeding where he was failing. How every time she'd chosen him over me throughout our childhood, he'd encouraged it, manipulated it, fed her fears that I'd become arrogant or resentful if I got too much positive attention. How he'd told her not to contact me after I left because I needed to cool off, and would come back eventually. How he'd convinced her I was being dramatic and would apologize once I grew up. How he'd told her Dad's funeral was too small and private to bother tracking me down for, that I probably wouldn't come anyway. She'd believed all of it. Every lie. Every manipulation. And now she was sitting with the reality that she'd destroyed her relationship with one son to coddle the other. And the son she'd coddled had been playing her the entire time. She asked if I could forgive her. If we could start over. I asked her a question instead. If my brother hadn't confessed, if he hadn't broken down, would she be calling me right now? The silence told me everything. She started explaining how she didn't know, how he'd seemed so sincere, how she'd only wanted both of us to be happy. I cut her off. Told her the problem wasn't that she didn't know. It was that she never asked. She never questioned why I was always the one who had to sacrifice. She never wondered if maybe my brother's struggles were his own responsibility to solve. She took the easy path every single time, and I paid the price. She cried harder. Said she'd been a terrible mother. That she understood if I never wanted to see her again. I told her I didn't know what I wanted yet. That I needed time. That 3 years ago I'd needed a mother who would stand up for me, and she'd chosen not to be that person. I couldn't just forget that because it was convenient for her now. She asked if there was anything she could do. I told her the truth. I'd built a life without her. A good life. I had a career I was proud of, colleagues who respected me, a future that looked bright. I didn't need her support anymore because I'd learned to support myself. If she wanted a relationship with me now, it would have to be because she actually valued me, not because she felt guilty or wanted something. Then I told her I'd think about it and hung up. Final update. 6 months have passed since that call. Mom and I have coffee once a month now, always at a neutral location, always with clear boundaries. She's in therapy, actually working on herself. We talk about safe subjects mostly, her garden, my work in vague terms, the weather. Sometimes we touch on harder topics. She apologized formally once, a real apology that took accountability. It didn't fix everything, but it was something. My brother sent one email, a long, rambling thing that was half apology, half justification. I read it once and never responded. I heard through Mom that he moved to another state for a job opportunity, apparently trying to start fresh somewhere nobody knows his history. I hope it works out for him, genuinely. But his success or failure isn't my responsibility anymore. The business is thriving. We're expanding into 2 new markets next quarter. I'm dating someone I met through work, someone who thinks my ambition is attractive, not threatening. I bought a new car last month without checking my bank account first. Small wins that mean everything. Sometimes I think about that graduation party, those deflated balloons in the backyard, how devastating it felt in that moment. How certain I was that I'd lost something irreplaceable. I did lose something, but what I built in its place turned out to be so much better than anything they could have given me. I learned I didn't need their validation to succeed. I learned that sometimes walking away from people who diminish you is the most powerful choice you can make. My diploma hangs in my office now, in a frame that actually matches the decor. Next to it is my master's degree. Above my desk is the business license with my name on it as co-founder. I don't need a party to celebrate who I've become. I'm living the celebration every single day, and that's a revenge they can never take away.